Welcome back to Virteva's Let's Talk podcast, a show where we dive into the latest and greatest Microsoft cloud technologies and help you understand how they can help your business thrive. It's episode 23. I'm Scott Ludwin, and on this episode, we're joined by our training and enablement lead, Holly Peterson, to break down the newest features headed soon to Microsoft 365 Copilot, announced as part of their Wave 2 initiative. Before we get into the news for the week, we'd like to take a moment to ask if you could hit those like, subscribe, and share buttons to help the channel grow and to get our message out to more people. We recently passed 1,000 subscribers, and it would be awesome if we were able to hit 2,000 by the end of this year. Holly, again, welcome back to the show. Glad to have you here. I know that we've been very excited to talk about all these new announcements coming to Copilot here pretty soon. And it's been, so we're recording this on a Friday. This is going live on a Tuesday. We typically do that just so that there's a little bit of time for post-production in between. But yeah, there is a lot of stuff new coming to Copilot as part of these Wave 2 announcements. Some of it's iterative and some of it's just brand new. So I had a workshop this week to kind of go through, what exists in Copilot today. And these announcements came out and I wanted to make sure that, I didn't shortchange that customer and not tell them about what got announced Monday. So I made this high level slide that I put up on the screen. But I think one of the key things that I just wanted to talk about is it hasn't even been a full year yet, right? And we've already seen 700 product updates, 150 new features added to Copilot. And then again, in June, they introduced that new GPT 4.0 model that was shared by OpenAI. And that led to faster response times by about 2x. Microsoft is saying 3x improvement in response rate, which for our listeners and watchers is that basically is correlated with, did you hit the thumbs up button or did you hit the thumbs down button when you got a response?
So please keep doing that. Please give your feedback to Microsoft. Remember, this product is not quite a year old, and it's crazy the advances that they're sort of making and throwing at it. And I think a lot of that comes not only from competing in the marketplace, but from feedback from people that use Copilot. So keep giving your feedback to Microsoft.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that when I look at 700 product updates and 150 new features added, I look back at past versions of Scott and Holly talking about this. We did our first 30 days with Copilot podcast. And I feel like as we did that, it was hard not to be down on it a little bit because they set such a high expectation at Ignite and in December and January with the announcements. And just, we use it for 30 to 60 days. And we work with Microsoft as a partner to sell the product and educate users on it. And it's hard not to feel a little bit down in those early days when you were looking at it. And it was just like, hey, I asked it to rewrite this text. And 45 seconds later, it told me that something went wrong. And I don't see that all that much anymore. True. But I think that, again, kind of like those thumbs up and the thumbs downs and the feedback help that, working with your MSPs or just having conversations with Microsoft through their message boards and their comment sections, that has all led to improved productization, and just services overall have gotten quite a bit better with Copilot. So I wanted to kind of talk through some of the new features here. We have a video from Microsoft on it as well, but just at a high level, things that you can kind of expect that are coming here is, so one of the requirements, and where I was talking about this in my workshop yesterday, is one of the prerequisites for Copilot is you have to use Microsoft Loop. But across this entire year, I've never really seen a need to use Loop except maybe in Microsoft Whiteboard. And even that was something that was iteratively added throughout the year. So it felt weird to be a requirement. But with Copilot Pages, which is the first thing that we'll see in the video when I start running it, this is a new feature that lets you open up copilot.microsoft.com. And then after you get your result, you can hit a little page button, and then it will actually open up into a window of its own on the side. And then you can use a loop component to interact with members of your team or your group and have conversations. And you can both copy and paste things from Copilot in and out of that loop component just for a more collaborative experience. Other stuff coming up that they were talking about, narrative builder, or not narrative builder, but what is it? It's PowerPoint Quick Start is a
Yep.
feature that existed in PowerPoint for quite some time, where you say, hey, I want to build a presentation on this, and it gives you some templates, and then it lets you choose what kind of title slides you want to put in. And I
Right.
saw on the Message Center boards that this is actually a feature that's being retired. And I was like, oh, well, they've got to be doing something with Copilot with that, right? And then
Right.
sure enough, we saw in the announcement Narrative Builder, which is a very similar take on that, where you
Right.
tell Copilot you need help creating a presentation, and then you give it a prompt. It's actually a new user-driven kind of like floating box than we've seen before.
Right.
And you just tell it what you want, and then it builds the presentation for you. And you can actually go in line and add new slides and add additional context to the presentation. And
Right.
it's a really cool take on building a PowerPoint from scratch. And again, it's kind of like that 80-20 rule is Copilot will do 80% of the work for you, and you just have to do the last 20%, which is putting the extra polish on the
Right.
presentation.
I think the PowerPoint piece, again, we can dive into it a little bit more in the video, but I would say for all of my years working as a trainer, watching people use PowerPoint, watching the way that people build slides, I'm still waiting for Copilot to be as easy as a save as, right? We
Yep.
need Copilot to be able to seamlessly reuse previous slides without the need for the digital asset library and without the need for the, I would say, you know, not maybe not extreme, but the rails of Microsoft's standard slide templates. So again, I still have very tempered expectations here, but it's exciting to see that they're taking something that, was like, okay, and saying, we haven't hit the ceiling yet. We're going to keep making it better.
Yeah. 100%. Like I know that the folks that I showed it to yesterday in our presentation were wowed by it, because it really does make it quite a bit easier to build it. And it almost had kind of, we've talked about Copilot and forms before. It had a very similar feel to that, where it
Right?
builds you a form and then you can kind of insert extra questions to it as you
It's
go.
great.
So next up were two announcements about Excel. So Copilot in Excel has finally gone into general availability. I used it after the announcement. It doesn't feel a lot different to me than it did before, but I think that that's just because we've been seeing iterative improvements throughout the year. I
Right.
will note that it has gotten a little bit better. I know that we just finished like a 10-week workshop with another client, and it it's not necessarily one of the fan favorite features out there, but I think that
Right.
Excel sits in such a unique section of businesses that there's just some people are really going to love it. Some people are just not going to adopt it as
Right.
well. The other part of it is they announced that Python and Excel has entered public preview, which I kind of scratched my head on this as well, because I thought that it already was in public preview based on previous announcements. But yeah, so Python and Excel is in public preview. A new feature got announced for Outlook called Prioritize My Inbox. So if you've been
Right.
following some of the stuff that Apple's been doing and Google has been doing with their phone OSs, is they have been finding new ways to use generative AI summaries on your inbox to just, kind of prioritize the most important messages and give you summaries of what those
Right.
are in line with the message. I was talking to Chris Strong about this earlier in the week as we were talking and breaking down the announcements. And one of the things that I said is like, hey, this is a really cool feature, and I think people are really going to love it. But how is that going to interact with the phone doing the same thing? Is it going to be AI summaries, feeding AI summaries? So that'll be interesting to see as that rolls out. That has not hit general availability yet, and I don't think that they have actually dated that yet, though we'll see as we kind of
Okay.
get closer to the video. Couple more announcements, just high level. Copilot's been added to OneDrive. It's actually been in there for a while, but I think that they kind of circled the wagons a little bit in their
Mhm.
announcement, or used it to pad the announcement a little bit with new features. If you haven't tried Copilot in OneDrive, I definitely recommend it. It is a good feature for quickly finding where something is on your OneDrive or comparing two different documents.
Right.
Um, Again, Copilot is kind of like a glorified summarization engine uh, for some of this stuff. But that, again, is it's saving you time finding
Right.
things. Speaking of glorified summarization engines, is Copilot Agents was announced, which is not rolled out yet, but it is coming soon. And what this is going to do is give you the ability to kind of just go to a SharePoint library, like a document library, and say,
Yep.
hey, here's all the files and documents in this library. I'm going to click a button that says create a Copilot agent, and then you can take that agent and just put it into a Teams chat or add it into a SharePoint site.
Right.
And you can use that to just quickly search all the information that you built that agent on.
Right.
Some questions remain on that around how does pricing work? Is it just included with your license, or is there going to be consumption license? Because it's very much creating a custom Copilot in Copilot Studio, at least from what
Yep.
I can see. And those were
Right.
questions that I don't feel got answered during the presentation. And I haven't had a lot of time to dig in to try and find that answer yet. But from what I've seen surface level on the articles that we'll provide in the show notes, is it wasn't really included either. But again, we might get more information on this as we get closer to Ignite.
Yep.
Talking about SharePoint, Copilot and SharePoint, which has been coming for months and months and months now, finally has a release date. It looks like of October 2024. So not only are you going to be able to use the Copilot agent there, but you'll also be able to have it help you not only with summarization, but also build SharePoint pages through
Right.
prompt-driven text boxes, which is going to be great. Holly, do you remember last year when they announced Copilot and Microsoft came out? Actually, it was 2 years ago, and they said you can use our business chat feature, which will let you interact with the Copilot chat agent, talk to your business data, get summaries, correlate data, get analysis, and then business chat became Copilot chat. Well, we have now kind of gone almost full circle back, and it sounds like, based on what I understand with these announcements, is they are relabeling it business chat again, but now it's BIZ chat. So it's biz chat.
I'm just waiting for Biz Chat
buzzword.
Home Premium Plus. You know, it's almost like comical at this point. I know they can't help themselves, but Microsoft is just fabulous at naming things.
Yep, for sure. So last two big announcements I have kind of bulleted up here. So OpenAI released the GPT-o1 model about a week and a half to 2 weeks ago at the time of this recording. And that model is going to be headed to Copilot at some point. No date was given for it. For our listeners and watchers, what the O1 model is supposedly going to be capable of is more advanced analysis and deeper learning. One other thing to keep in mind too is the O1 model is not connected to the internet. So it's going to be connected to your data sources and whatever is available to the large language models. But unlike the other Copilot versions that can talk out to Bing, this will not have the ability to actually reach out. And then final note that I had up here, and we've been talking about this for about a month and a half now on and off, is that there's been improved grounding being added for your data in Teams, Outlook, and OneDrive, including new folders in Outlook. It can now talk to meeting chat to better understand and add context there. And then again, it can see more on OneDrive than it previously could in SharePoint as well. But yeah, those are kind of the high level notes. So Holly, what I wanted to do is kind of play the video and then we can kind of watch some of this stuff unroll. And I'm going to keep the audio muted just because it would be a little bit confusing, especially for our audio listeners, but we can kind of talk over the features as we see them come up. And then I'll break these sections up into chapters for our YouTube listeners. So they're calling this the new UI for AI, which more buzzwords, just like the biz chat. But this is kind of just their push. We're going to see Satya Nadella kind of introduces this, and then he kind of just hands the mic over to Jared Spataro, who is their lead for modern work. Copilot Pages, which is generally available according to Microsoft, but I haven't seen it yet. So again, for our video watchers, you can see that they're doing a demo right now of Copilot Pages where they're prompting Copilot on the web. It's providing information back. And then there'll be a little button in the bottom left corner under your footnotes to say edit in page or add to a page. And then it'll kind of pop out almost, if you've used this feature before in Microsoft Edge, is a split view window where it
Mm-hmm.
opens up a loop component that it automatically creates. The assumption here is that that loop component is probably going to live on the creator's OneDrive as they do today when you kind of do this in like a recurring meeting. And then you'll be able to talk back and forth with Copilot and add more information directly to that page together. So
Right.
I I think that this is an interesting feature, but I think that it's probably going to be pretty niche, don't you think, Holly? I
Yeah.
don't know how widely adopted this will be by the larger audience.
I would say just, based on some recent uh, kind of looks at this, we still don't have a lot of loop users, period. So I think, loop being kind of the starting ground of it is going to present some issues for people because the use of pages is going to require some knowledge on how to use loop and loop
Yep.
components. And I think that'll be a little bit of a hurdle for some people. Um,
Yeah, it's really just it's a whole different way of working when you're working with Loop. In what Loop has been around since it was announced at Ignite, I want to say in what 2020, and it became more widely available a couple of years later through just base Loop components. And then the following year, I think it was last year, we started spending more time talking about it on the show. Is it became available kind of in its own Canvas level app, which again was something that got previewed a few years back, but just didn't come to be for probably, the pandemic slowed down development on it.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I mean, I try and get more people to use it internally here at Virteva, but it can be a struggle. And I know you and I use it for show notes for like the roadmap rundown. And it's very helpful because we can just go
yep,
into one document and edit everything and do it through Teams or an Outlook message. And we don't have to worry about tracking down where does that document live or if it gets
yep,
sent as an attachment. It's very helpful. So I'm hopeful that Copilot and Pages is going to add on, but it's almost interesting as you watch the announcement, they don't say a thing about Loop. they
right,
just they just call it Copilot and Pages. So to me, that makes me wonder: are they gonna try and stop pushing it as hard as a new application or new service? And are they instead at this point just, hey, this just lives in the back end. This is how it works. It's like doing something like on your Windows computer. It's like, it works, but you don't know how it works. It just
right.
kind of is there. And that's almost
Well,
what it feels like with this announcement for Copilot and Pages.
right. The sort of lack of it reminds me of SharePoint and SharePoint lists becoming just lists.
Lists.
It was sort of like if I'm like, let's try loop, and they're like, I don't understand that. I'm not into that, right? Same thing. SharePoint lists, super powerful tool. They just had to call them lists and sort of put sugar in the medicine of using SharePoint. And so I think this could be a similar sort of parallel to that, where
Yep.
we're going to get you to use Loop one way or the other, even if we don't call it Loop.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is probably their road forward. Though we'll see. Maybe they'll do some more development on it. I have seen them adding more stuff to Loop through the roadmap. But again, if there's no activity in there, how much
Right,
longer does it become a full featured product before it just becomes a back end
right.
service that runs things for them? So we'll jump back in here to the presentation. So we can see he's still in Pages here. Now he's switching the tab over to Work. And I think that this is one of the interesting parts of it too, is that they have even noted in the presentation and in kind of the blog post that came afterwards that they are intending for Copilot Pages to work with non-Entra accounts. And that's very interesting to me because where does the loop component live? How do you share it with somebody externally if you're not sharing it within your organization? But they call it out in the demo here. So maybe you'll have to have a Microsoft 365 personal or a Copilot Pro subscription to make it work that way. But the video here is just kind of continuing to go on and show off some additional, loop functionality that we've seen before, being able to attach files in Copilot, seeing people doing real-time collaboration through that real-time co-authoring functionality.
I think file referencing is sort of a huge hero in a lot of this type of work with Copilot, whether you're doing it in a page or not. I think making sure your files are stored where Copilot can see them and be referenced, it's so powerful. I don't always see people doing it. And I think almost, we do so much reuse of previous good work that we should be, this should be kind of like one of the top tools in your Copilot Swiss Army knife is referencing files that way.
Yep. And they have made it easier over time too. So I remember, again, looking back into the past when we first started using this, is like you literally would do like a forward slash. There was no reference file available in Copilot. And it really kind of just came down to, all right, we'll start typing the file that you know. But if you don't know what the file name is you're looking for, well, tough luck. We're not going to be able to find it. And there
Right.
was even limitations early on where if that file wasn't recently cached, you would never find the file that
Yeah.
you actually needed to reference.
Yes.
And they've gone a long way of improving that.
Yep.
And we've seen that in some of like the teams and the Copilot stuff that's popped up here, where you could switch between the people and the meetings and the files tabs and the emails. And again, it's improving over time. It's iterative improvements. This is why they probably had 700 improvements in the last year, is because they pushed this product out to market, I feel like, Copilot, to get in front of everybody else that was going to do the same thing. And there's pros and cons to that, right? Is the pros are, yeah, you get out in front of the marketing, you have the name recognition that you're doing it. But the cons are, is do you leave such a bad taste in your customer's mouth that they just bounce off the product and they don't want to actually onboard onto it? And we've seen that in some of the, Microsoft hasn't publicized sales data, but some of the analyst comments that we've seen around it in the first year have been, nobody's buying it. Like Microsoft, I think I saw a stat recently that said 1% of companies that use Microsoft 365 have adopted Copilot at this point.
Right.
And 1% is a small number. That number feels even smaller when you look up against the number of actual business and enterprises that uses it, which is something like 430 million.
Right.
So it's a very, very small number of adoption. And I think
Right.
it's like the first generation of a new car is, hey, if you really want to be cutting edge and jump in there and get that, fantastic. It's like folding phones. There weren't a lot of people rushing out to buy a folding phone the first year there are. And some would say that there's still not a lot of people rushing out to do that. But there's going to be enthusiasts that want to adopt it. We're certainly part of that crowd here at Virteva, and we're here to help customers along on that journey. But I think that as we go into wave 2 and we see these iterative improvements kind of take over and more stuff's added and it's in a better spot, I think you'll see more customers adopt. I think that another thing that would really get customers to adopt, and we've talked about this, I feel like beating a dead horse here, is take Outlook and Teams out of the experience and offer that as its own Copilot experience. And I don't think Microsoft is going to do it, because I think that most people would be okay not to have it in Word, not to have it in Excel, not to have it in PowerPoint. But maybe what we'll see is, as the market adjusts, we saw the Feds cut interest rates recently here in the US. Maybe we'll see the price go down over time. I read something today that Microsoft is also looking at improving power efficiency by potentially opening up a nuclear power plant on 3 Mile Island, which has been closed forever since that awful incident that happened 30 to 40 years ago. But anyways, we're getting on to Copilot and Excel now and the new Python features. So this is generally available. Again, iterative improvements have been made to the tool. So I think it's hard for me and maybe even you, Holly, to really kind of understand what's different. But as we're watching the video here, one of the biggest things that I've noticed is that there is quite a bit more detail in the Copilot area when you're working with the data. One of the things I noticed yesterday is it didn't try to force build me a table when I went into a new workbook. So I think that it is playing a little bit better with the table data that is existing there. You can even see that it's doing a better job of analyzing what's available than was previously there.
One of the things that I always see this sort of like balance with Microsoft is Microsoft has always from the beginning of Excel, a really prescriptive way of using this tool. Excel, there is a right way to do everything in Excel.
Mhm.
And we have people that have kind of, you know, taught themselves Excel, gotten better at it, that maybe don't always use the prescripted method to accomplish certain tasks. So the way that data is structured, here we have someone kind of using Power Query and stuff like that. Some people might kind of rig that up themselves, kind of doing, poor man's Power Query. And so that's kind of something that I always see as a struggle with Excel is some people are like, yeah, I could see if it's kind of useful, but there's if you run afoul of the prescriptive way of using Excel, I still think people are going to struggle to use Copilot effectively in Excel. But that's not to say the changes that they're showing here, how using conditional formatting on written text and
Yep.
that kind of stuff is really, really exciting. So if you do use Excel fairly prescriptively at a more advanced level, I think you're going to be really excited about these changes. If you are in the middle, though, you're not a really beginner, you're not a more advanced user, I think you're still going to be you're going to have some struggles with it.
And again, I think it kind of gets back to the 80/20 rule is it takes 80% of the difficulty of working with it and understanding how to use it out, and it does a lot of that stuff through you. And again, a lot of it's prompt driven is if you
Mm-hmm.
don't know how to prompt it and ask the right questions or know what you want to do, it's not going to do it right. So a perfect example of this is yesterday I said highlight the text in these cells that matches up to this criteria, and it told me it couldn't do that, but it could apply conditional formatting, and then it told me how it would apply it and then asked me, do you want to apply it? I hit the button and then it applied it to the chart.
Right.
And that's something that previously I wouldn't have been able to do 3 or 4 months ago in Excel, but they've gotten to that point where it can actually do that.
Right.
Just like similarly how like now Python is in public preview. So this means that you can use it today, but it's iterating over time and getting better.
Right.
I myself I don't know how to code in Python, and I don't know enough about Python to even be dangerous with it, but maybe Copilot through prompting can help me write formulas and do more because that additional functionality is available now.
Right. I think the prompting, the capability in Copilot is it's kind of similar with, what we're kind of seeing here. If you write a really good prompt and you describe things in that prescriptive way that Excel does things, you're going to get some great results. But if you kind of like in sometimes maybe you don't even quite know what you're trying to ask Excel to do. You
Mm-hmm.
know what you want it to look like. So as soon as that sort of like the level of, I don't have to give the world's greatest prompt. I can kind of loosely describe what I want Excel to try to do with this data. And Excel can kind of carry that for me, do the work out of my kind of like maybe not so great prompt. I think more and more people will really love what's happening in Excel.
Yep.
I am really, really excited for the improvements. And frankly, I'm excited for the word preview to be gone out of
Well, it is
Excel
gone.
because I
It is
think
gone.
that it never made people feel confident about what was happening in there.
Yep. Yeah. I think the preview really, so I know preview was removed because as soon as they said it was generally available, I'm like, oh, is it? And I opened Excel and I popped the window open. I was like, oh, the preview button actually is gone. It's not there anymore.
I know, it's
Fantastic.
exciting.
And then as I was kind of doing some demos yesterday in our workshop I did see a few things out there still saying Copilot's in preview. So like in Planner, it's still in preview.
Right.
It's still in preview, I believe, in like Whiteboard and Loop and stuff like that. But
Yep.
we are starting to see that preview tag fall off more and more stuff, which is,
Right.
I think is going to reassure more and more customers as we enter 2025 next year. Can't
Right.
believe that I'm saying the words
I
2025
know.
already. That this product is more ready than it was a year ago.
Right.
Well, let's jump in with Hadley Griffin here, the product manager for Office AI, and we'll take a look at some of the new features. We're getting a kind of a preview of what Narrative Builder can do in Copilot and PowerPoint.
Right.
And as we talked about at the beginning of the show, this is kind of deprecating an old feature, which was that kind of quick start guide. So as we watched through here, there is a new prompt driven menu, and it pops up even a new box out of that sidebar. And it lets you basically write a prompt on, hey, this is what I want you to create a presentation about. And then you can kind of go through, move some of these slides around, make some more important, and then add things to that presentation before you actually want to go ahead and fully generate it. You
Yep.
can even incorporate your own business's files. And something that's coming as well to PowerPoint very soon is the brand manager feature, where you'll be able to kind of bring in your own custom images as
Good.
well as your own custom templates. You can use your own templates today, but you have to make sure that you open up your own template first.
Yes, and remember, not all like I'm just gonna say, not all templates are built in the prescriptive way that
Yes.
Microsoft wants them built. For years and years and decades that we didn't have something like Copilot, we could do whatever we wanted for a template. I can't tell you how many times I asked people for their PowerPoint template. You know, we build a lot of content on our client slides, and it's not a PowerPoint template at all. It's just
It's a
a set of
PowerPoint file.
slides
Yes.
that are sort of designed to be copy pasted around. So this is probably one of the things where I really it's brilliant what Microsoft is doing. It really truly is. I think what we still don't have a balance on is sort of the reality of the way that people use these tools. And until Copilot can do some of that lifting for us, I think that there's still going to be, you know, like, this sounds great. And I think you kind of said it in the beginning. You know, we haven't seen all of this in action. The demos always work perfectly. They look great, but of course we want to get our hands on it and see what it's really like when you're, you know, driving around on the real streets with it. This solution for PowerPoint, I am so excited to try it. Not only at Virteva for the work that we do, I think this would be really helpful for, you know, junior consultants, junior salespeople, maybe even some people that have worked with us for a long time, where, hey, they have really great skills, but maybe PowerPoint isn't one of them. So I'm really excited to see this one specifically, but I always have that little bit of doubt just based on how we know people use these tools, that it falls outside of that. I think we said long ago when you and I first talked about Copilot, when we did our first kind of podcast on it, is that I've watched people use Office for years, and some people are really good at it, and some people are just really bad at using Office. You know, we say they don't use templates, they don't use styles, they don't use tables, and these are the rails that Copilot runs on. So I'm still eagerly awaiting Copilot to improve to the level of, like, we can kind of tell what you're trying to do here. It's not technically a template, but I got you, and I'm going to build your presentation with this. Or Copilot will spur the prescriptive use of these tools on.
Yeah.
People will realize if we
and
want to get the
self-admittedly,
value out of our license, we've got to use the tools in a better way.
Yeah, and a lot of people self-admittedly will even come out and say, hey, I'm really good at financial analysis and Excel, but I don't know how to format a Word document. And same things, like some people will say that I am an amazing speaker. I'm an amazing public speaker. I can stand in front of a conference room full of people, but if I had to do that in an email, I can't do it. And that's the gap, like you said, Copilot is trying to fill, is it's trying to make those things easier to not only free up time, but just make us feel more comfortable in our own skin.
Right.
So next up, they're going into talking a little bit more about Copilot and Teams and meeting chat. And we didn't talk about this one a whole lot at the beginning of the show, but these are just some iterative improvements, I believe, that are coming to with the grounding features that we noted, being able to see what happened in meeting chat, what were people talking about, what were the overall expectations from the call, and kind of bringing all of that data together. So again, this isn't a huge change. This is really iterative. There's also that Teams Copilot experience that's coming that they announced earlier this year but I don't expect to hear a whole lot more
Right.
about that probably until Ignite. Up on the screen now, they're talking about Copilot and OneDrive, which again, this has been actually available now, I think, for what, about 2 months? Holly, I think that they rolled this out in June or July. And
Yeah, I
this
was sort
is
of noticing it available.
yeah, and what this is all about is, again, it's more glorified summarization of files, but you have the ability to kind of compare files now rather than just hunt them down. So if you needed to know what was my company's revenue in 2023 and 2022,
Yep.
compare how did it go up, how did it go down? Those are things that it'll be able to help with. And then
Yep.
similarly here, they're talking about some of the improvements that are happening to Microsoft Word, which I found these to be pretty neat. So we talked about the ability to be able to create a table off of numbers in an earlier show, but now it's going to be able to compare multiple documents rather than just kind of like one at a time, as well as like referencing with that improved grounding, people, meetings, chats, etc.
Being able to build documents off of meeting content, or that sort of that combination, is going to be
Yep.
huge for people. Again, remember, this demo shows it working
Yes.
perfectly, and we all know that the transcript of a meeting can be slightly
Mhm.
imperfect at times just based on how that meeting went down. But man, I am really excited for this. It's probably something that I think, for those people that love the meeting recap
Yep.
feature, this is like one of those things where it's like, okay, keep following the breadcrumbs with me then from your AI recap, and let's go use it in
Mhm.
Word.
And I'm pretty sure here now coming up, we're going to be talking about the new prioritize my inbox feature in
Uh,
Outlook. And there it is. So again, kind of what we talked about. So this is coming soon. I don't think there's any dates on this, and I haven't checked the roadmap to be sure, but I would say that this is probably coming by end of year or early next year. And again, so you can kind of see, like, for the YouTube watchers, the little arrow ups on the individual messages on the inbox, and a new way of sorting in Outlook to kind of put those at the top. So right now you can sort by like flags and read and unread and marked by importance. This is giving
mhm.
you an AI generated way to kind of move those up. And there's also this new learning component from it too that you just saw displayed on the screen, where
Right.
you can say that, hey, I prioritize my inbox. Now I want you to look at these emails, look at the senders, look at the subjects, and understand that these are things that I think are important. So in the future, when you see an email come in like this, I want you to add that prioritization flag to it so that it is at the top. So this is almost kind of like an iterative approach with Copilot to improving focused inbox, I would say.
Right. And I as a dedicated focused inbox user, I dislike all of the focused inbox hate out in the world. So, like, I think this is a good way of getting people to understand the value of something like focused inbox that's been there the whole time. But I would say, this really turns it on its
Yep,
ear. I'm excited to use
for
it.
sure. And Holly, I was one of those focused inbox haters, and for about a few months now, I have turned around on that. I have been using it. I have not forced it off. I'm using it on mobile. I'm using it on the new Outlook, and I'm getting more used to it. I haven't forced turned it off. Threaded emails, I still can't get used to. I just prefer individual messages in my inbox. I'm old school like that, I guess.
I don't know why. I don't know what it is in my brain, but the most reviled settings and features in Outlook are the ones that I like. Maybe it's a sickness. I don't know, but conversation threads, focused inbox, on.
Yeah. My issue with threads always comes down to is you have to go down to the individual part of the email that you want to respond to, and then it's
Right,
oddly then sorts that for everybody else in the message because you're responding to an earlier email in the thread. But in any
right.
case, one other thing that I did want to talk about prioritize my inbox as well is they did not provide a lot of detail in the YouTube video in the announcement. Is this coming to classic Outlook, or is this a new Outlook only feature? So it'll be interesting to see how that plays and if they can get that to work with the old classic UI. I personally, and I talked about this yesterday, we talked about it on the show a few weeks back, is that the new Outlook is generally available. And I don't think that they're going to continue to put new features into the old Outlook at this point anymore. I think that that is the way that they are going to push people to move.
I think that based on the metrics that they're collecting, I'm going to give them a benefit of the doubt and say they're going to probably make more of a data-driven decision on it. For those that have the Copilot license, if they can look at that subset of users and see who is and isn't using new Outlook scenarios or classic, see where people are, I think they probably just got tipped over that way on some, even Copilot availability.
Yeah, the summarize my
in
inbox
classic
feature
Outlook.
for sure. Absolutely.
So I would say they'll probably make, they're collecting that data. I'm assuming it'll be a data-driven decision. However, if you're listening, everyone, if you have not started trying new Outlook, using it for more extended periods of time, I would say there's never been a better time. It's generally available. Microsoft continues to make updates to it. Do not wait until we get into the opt-out phase. I am anticipating as a change management, communications training person that I'm going to be very busy during those sorts of opt-out periods where people are going to be kind of forced into the new Outlook experience. I don't know what's going to happen then. We've seen Microsoft back off of some of those things. We've seen timelines slide in the past, but I think they're so motivated to get to this more singular version of Outlook that I think they're going to hold the line. So please, everyone, whether you have Copilot or not, please start trying new Outlook on the regular. I'm sitting everyone down right now. I'm holding your hands. I'm saying it's happening. Microsoft will make you use new Outlook. So make it your choice to use new Outlook right now instead of waiting to be pushed off the cliff.
Yeah, and if you're an IT service manager or you just work in IT, these are conversations to start having internally is, do we want to give people the ability to actually flip that slider back and forth to start getting used to it? Because a lot of organizations, they don't let people even try it.
Exactly.
And
one of the things I thought, Microsoft has that timeline graphic for the new Outlook rollout. I want everyone to start looking at that regularly. And then also maybe Scott and you and I should build one for the stages of grief that people are going to go through. And we're going to need to start putting okay, we're at denial, right? I think that's where we are right now. We're at denial. We're going to get to that bargaining stage. So please start making it your choice to use it. Yeah, IT admins, stop hiding that switch. You can't put your head in the sand on this. Microsoft is incredibly motivated to make this happen. So it's something that we really have to start banging the drum about and talking about.
Yeah, in terms of upgrading your machines from Windows 10 to Windows 11, that's going to be much more difficult than getting people to switch over to the new Outlook, especially if you're behind right now. And I mean, once we get to that retirement date next year with Windows, I would not be surprised that within a year they're announcing what's next. And then you're going to have to go through that again. So don't put yourself in that situation of strife and grief where you're trying to do multiple technology upgrades at the same time. Let's try and start to understand what features available, what can you not live without today, and try and weigh that out and start to upgrade as you can.
Right.
All right.
Right. And we want to help you.
Yep. All right. So next up, and I believe that this is one of the last announcements that comes up, is the Copilot agents part. Yeah, this looks like this is the last announcement from the video. And again, we talked about this earlier. What this is really, so we got introduced to Copilot Studio earlier this year, the ability to go in and create an agent on your own from scratch. This replaced Power Platforms, Power Virtual Agents, which was I don't know how well received it was. I've worked with hundreds of different customers, and I've seen maybe 3 or 4 that were actually spending the time to build these out. What Copilot Studio
Right.
intended to do was make it easier, and what I believe Copilot Agents is trying to do is not replace that functionality wholesale, but it's trying to make it even easier for people to kind of come in there and adopt. And I wonder if some of the telemetry and the usage data that they had on the back end showed them that there just wasn't enough. So this is their way
Right.
of getting people more interested in it.
What I like to think about Copilot agents, so long ago when we were talking about Power Virtual Agents, I would show people, people would say, "Oh, we're very interested in this. Like, show us how to do it." But it was sort of like once you pulled back the curtain and you said, "And you have to build the whole
Mm-hmm.
thing. You have to understand the logic. You have to build out you have to define the types of questions you can answer. You have to define the answers. You have to define the pathways that people might follow." And they would just close
Yep.
those curtains back up and go, "No, thank you." So Copilot agents is what everyone wishes Power Virtual Agents
Yep.
was. It's sort of like you're just telling it, "Do this, use this information, figure it out," and it
Yep.
does, essentially. I'm sure there's a little more to that, but it's not
The
the
perfect example of that is
cognitive load that Power Virtual
yeah, the
Agents
perfect
was.
example of that too is what's on screen right now is what they're showing us with this product maintenance site. And you're just selecting everything in this document library and clicking create a Power Virtual Agent. We can see the Copilot Studio kind of icon pop up there. And then it just creates it. And as we're going to see here in a second, it gives you the ability to go in and either share it or click the edit button and do some additional tweaks to it. But you're literally just picking up a link and you're dropping it into, it looks like this is a group chat here for the technical product forum, and you can just talk to it. I mean, that's amazing, right? Like you could never do that with Power Virtual Agents 5 years ago. It's just,
It's it's like a
it's
snap.
making it more approachable.
Well, this is something that I think a lot about on so many levels. Every company has frequently asked questions that it gets asked all the time. And some of those types of where do I find this information can
Yep.
be a really big bottleneck, right? Only one person knows, only two people know the answer to that. So, one, it's going to be more imperative for companies to have documented stuff so it can live in SharePoint. So that could be a huge motivation. But at the same time, I just think like imagine what this will do from a time savings perspective.
Yeah.
There's so many times where we're like casting out lines to get a question, just a simple question answered. If a Copilot agent can collectively do that for you so that people can get their answers and keep working, I think it will be really huge.
Yeah. I mean, imagine you're a very small, scrappy department for a company, or maybe even you're a small, scrappy business, and you want to make a chatbot available, whether it's externally or internally. And this will be a little bit different between Power Virtual Agents and Copilot Studio. But imagine that you want to make that more widely available, but you don't have the technical capabilities to do that type of work yourself. Is you can literally just build something that can reference a knowledge base of information that's already available on your entire website, put it out there as a chat button, or same thing inside your company within a team or a SharePoint site. You can take all the documents that are available. And I mean, technically, you could probably even write a Power Automate script to when documents are added or removed, as it updates that
Exactly.
knowledge base. And then you just talk to it and you get your information. Imagine starting a new job today and you have to go through like this 2 to 3 month training process to get up to speed. Imagine knocking that down to a week and a half and then having access to the agent to answer all your questions so you're not bugging everybody on your team. Like
Right.
that's the power of what these Copilot agents may be able to do for organizations as they
Right.
become more mature and go into public availability or general availability. So I think it's super cool.
Well, and this kind of leads me down to, I don't know, it's just like a something that as we were talking about this, it made me think about like we all get asked the same question, 20 over and over again in the Santa Barbara, California subreddit on Reddit, you know, almost every day, someone is asking questions about, hey, I'm getting married in Santa Barbara. Who should I have as a caterer? Who should, whatever. And everyone sort of comments back like, will you just read the wiki? Ugh, will you just blah, 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 like search the posts here, whatever.
Yeah.
And I think it's like one of those things where, yes, I'm telling these, we have all that information. We know we have the answers to these questions, but it will never, ever, ever, ever stop people from posing the question.
Yep.
Very few people are
Look
as
first.
adept to just
Yeah.
look it up themselves. They want to go to a peer, they want to go to a person and say, what should I do? And this, I think, this is the perfect bridge from the human nature of asking the question to using the wealth of data that you already have. In fact, if I could front end the Santa Barbara subreddit about, what should I do on my weekend trip to Santa Barbara with some sort of chatbot, that would be amazing, because people have answered those questions over and over and over and over again. If there was a way to harness that, it would be fabulous. So I'm actually excited for this to go even further and be able to be grounded in more than just, a document library.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. More to come on this, I'm sure, in a future podcast as they make this
Yeah.
more widely available. So we're right at about an hour right now on the podcast. We'll probably trim it down a little bit, but there were a number of additional links that were provided as part of all these announcements that came out on Monday during the Wave 2 announcements. Those will be made available in the show notes. If you have any questions on any of that stuff, please feel free to reach out via our Copilot forum or let's talk at Virteva.com. We'd be happy to go into more detail with that. As for more updates coming on the channel, is Chris and I are still planning on breaking down some of those security announcements that happened back on the 10th. We had to wait about a week for those announcements to actually become publicly available because it was a closed forum for that. But we're excited to break that stuff down. More roadmap rundowns coming over the next few weeks as well as we head into Ignite. And then very excited. Ignite's only about a month and a half to 2 months away. Holly, thank you again so much for stopping by. Exciting times ahead for Copilot, and probably even more news coming as we get closer and closer to Ignite coming up third week in November. And for everyone that tuned in, thank you again for helping this show grow. If there were any news and announcements today that you wanted to dig further into, we've made sure to make them available in the show notes. If your organization is interested in Microsoft 365 or is already using it and you need help implementing or managing those services, you can contact Virteva by emailing us at letstalk@virteva.com or by visiting our website at www.virteva.com. Thanks again for joining us. And again, if you haven't already, please hit those like and subscribe buttons. Have a great week all. Bye.